Hey everyone, on to DATs. We've learned about tops, chops, sops, some comps, a little bit of mat. Going to figure out what DATs do. So here we see they keep data organized in tables and can run Python scripts. So what does that mean? I'll split it up into a few different parts. And then we'll get into a few other little Python snippets we can see here. But let's look first. Example 1, asset management with folder dat plus select dat, which we can see right here. So the idea behind this is we can put assets in a folder somewhere. It could be movies, still images, audio files, whatever. And access those files with this folder dat. So we can see some MP4s right here. If we just kind of go over here to this file, so we are looking at, we're in week 3 intro to DATs .toe. I've got this assets folder right here. And if I go in here, I've got lots of stuff, movies. So here we see these 4 little movie clips. Okay. So with the folder dat, I can just do this side by side here. Folder. So click that. So by default, it's going to look at the same folder that the current project is in. But we can just go root folder. Let's just hit plus here, and I'm going to hit assets, and then movies. And when I do that, we can see it finds all of the files inside there. Great. It also gives us some other info. It's got folders, names, columns. So we got name. Path is there in case we need that. I actually don't really need path, so we can just get rid of that. If we need all kinds of other information, the size and bytes of each file, the type of file it is, its extension, just base name. So there's all kinds of kind of cool things here. Date created that maybe we need sometimes, maybe not. So here, what I'll do is we send that through into a select dat, which is going to select just a single row. And then, you know what, I don't need this path thing. Let's just get rid of the path. Okay, great. Makes it easier. And then it ends with a null dat. And then that gets teleported over to my movie file in top. And we are referencing that, and we can see it ends up kind of grabbing the name of that movie, and it displays it right here. And to change this little select dat, we've got a little chop thread here going. LFO is on pulse, frequency 0.1. So once every 10 seconds, it sends a tiny pulse. When count receives that pulse, it increments the count. So count chop is another kind of cool chop I want everyone to learn about. Also, just you can set its behavior. So it's set to loop. The minimum is 1. The maximum is however many rows we have here. So it's going to loop from 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go back to 1 as it counts. So when it receives something that goes off to on, such as a pulse that goes from 0 to 1, it's going to increase count. We can change that behavior in various ways. We can give it, if I pulse this, it's going to reset right there. So reset value, it doesn't actually go to 0 because the loop is set to 1 being the minimum. Great. We can change little details of how it's triggered. So trigger threshold 0, like if so anytime the number goes over 0, it gets triggered. So this pulse is going 0 to 1 for whatever reason. If I wanted it to trigger on some different threshold, I can set that right there. It's triggering on increasing values. So if I want it to do the opposite for some reason, it can trigger on when it goes from 1 back to 0, let's say, so on a decreasing value. So lots of details we can change there. Also rename chop. It's the first time I've shown that. It's not strictly necessary, but I find it's helpful sometimes to have a channel name kind of be actually what it does. So just renaming that to counter. And then got the null right here. So let's look a little bit at these references and what's happening. So folder goes into select, and let's actually do this over so we can see what's happening with select. I'm going to get select. So I want I want an easy way to use my chop LFO up there to cycle through these different rows. Select dat allows me to select individual rows or columns or whatever. So let's do select rows. Let's do by index. So that's just going to be, the row. So it starts with row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. And so we can set the start row index and end row index. And this is already blue. So if I click that, we can see it's set to just be the last row. Because what this says is, so the table that's being input here, how many rows does it have? So the total number of rows is 5 rows, right? But the index of this last one is not 5 because this starts at 0. So we minus 1, therefore the index is 4. I don't want to show all these rows. I just want to show one of these at a time. So what I can do is, like, what if this was both 1, 1, right? So it's going to show just row 1. If that's like a 2, 2, it's going to show row 2. Okay, great. So I'm going to have this parameter get a chop reference from my null up there. And so one slick way we can do this, typically we want to minimize the number of chop references that we have just for, in case we have to change something, it makes our life easier. So let's say I could do this. I'm going to chop reference, beautiful, and right here, chop reference, great. So now these are both receiving a reference from my null1 counter, and it works, it's great. A slightly better way to do it, a little more slick way to do it, would be to only do the reference to one of these, let's say start row index, and then on my end row index, I could write a little something that says me dot par dot, and then put the name of my other thing. So this is right there. You see that row index start? That is the magic Python name for this parameter. So if I do this, row index start, functionally this does the same thing, but this now is copying whatever this number is, and this field is getting it from the chop. So if we needed to change that reference for whatever reason, we only have to change it in one place, and then this just kind of like automatically copies whatever is here. Also, it's just kind of nice to understand the kind of Python syntax of all this, right? So me is this operator. Par stands for a parameter somehow that is in its parameter window here, and then the actual name of that parameter. So you can always find out names of parameters by either mousing over the name, and then it shows up right there. It's always lowercase, all one word, or we can click the little plus, and then it shows up here, but then we need to kind of make sure. Sometimes that's not totally visible, so you kind of have to put the cursor over there to find out what it is. And so then that's doing what I want it to do. I could do the same with columns, whatever. I don't have more than one column here, so it doesn't make sense. For certain things, if I had labels, I could search by name, all these other conditions, but for now we can just stick to index. Beautiful. And then in with a null. So always, when you're doing any references, smart to end with a whatever, null top, null chop, null sop, null dat. Just in case, let's say if I needed to change something, I could always drag this over, insert a new operator there, and then this reference is still looking at the null, so it wouldn't have to change the reference itself, just saving yourself from extra labor further down the road. So I've got the name of this file. So movie file in, I want to load that. Let me just get a new movie file in and we can do this. Okay. So to do a reference with chops, super easy, just viewer active, drag that over to the parameter that you want. With a dat, it is not so easy. We have to type this out manually. So if I go to file here, I need to click this little plus. Let's just go ahead and delete that. So there's no way I can like click and drag that over, right? So I need to type this out. So I need to make sure I go to expression and I type out op called null2. If we look, like in here, for instance, the way it's written out, the op called null1. So the operator name is in parentheses, and then the channel name is in brackets. So the channel name is counter here. Let's see, counter. So here I'm trying to reference this. So the operator name, null2, that's the same. I have brackets, but there's no channel name. There's just a row and column value. So I do something like that. So row 0, column 0, because that's all I have right here. We don't see the 0 over here, but it is row 0, because that's the only one there is. So we can see right here, it's grabbing that text, that string, perfectly. But I'm still getting an error right here because it says failed to open file. That's because it is looking, by default, it's looking in the same directory as this .toe is found. So here's where I'm working in right now. So anywhere in this folder right now, do we see a 1_facemirror.mp4? Like, no, we don't. We have to go into assets, we have to go into movies, and then there it is. So we have to add a little extra string over here. So to do this, to create a string of data type, we start with a quotation mark, assets, movies, don't forget that final slash, plus. There we go. So this is how in Python it's called concatenating strings, where we have like a little bit of a string here in quotes, asset slash movie slash, and then plus, and then this resolves itself to a string. So kind of just combines that together, and then beautiful. It's finding the right path and showing the movie. It works great. I just have to make sure, right, if you didn't have that slash, you see how that kind of ends up right there. So remember your final slash. Okay, so this would be a way, you have a folder of video clips, whatever. This is really handy, especially if you're like creating video clips for a VJ project or whatever. You keep loading that into the folder, and you want to somehow just dynamically like load those movie files in various ways. I mean, you know, there's any number of ways that we could do this. We could have done something like, how else can I do this? What if I had like a noise and a hold? So this is kind of like a sample and hold situation. Let's get a different something there maybe. And so I'd have to, whatever, let's just do this. So I've got kind of random numbers in here. Every time this pulses, it's going to grab a new value from here. Beautiful. So this value I want to send to a range probably based on, because I want the initial number to be between 1 and 4, right? And this looks like it's going basically, I mean, maybe 0.5 to negative 0.5. So I probably do something like, do a math range coming in, negative 0.5 to positive 0.5, and I want it to be from 1 to 4. And then also maybe I just want that to be an integer, because for this sort of a thing, we can't be sending it float numbers. Like there is no row number 3.654. So another math chop, and here, integer right here. We can do a rounding. Ceiling goes to the top integer. Floor will just go to the integer below it, and then round will go to whatever the closest integer is. Beautiful. So I could just do that, right? So this is a different little way that we're going to pick movies. It's a little more randomized, whereas a count is just going to increment 1, 2, 3, 4. So it doesn't matter. It all depends on how you want to do that. Just get this back for a moment. And just see briefly also this count. I have a little thing going here. So number of rows. So let's say I'm working on this. I created 2 more movie files. I plop that in my folder. Folder.dat will automatically recognize that next time you open up the project. You can also say refresh right now. So even right now, it's going to show up automatically, which is great. If that was off, you'd have to pulse it, and it'll read the files that are in that folder. So it happens automatically. The thing is, right now I had this set to loop from 1 to 4. If I didn't have this extra special little code there, I would then also have to remember to go in here because, I have 6 movies now, not 4. So I need this to be 6 instead. That's simple enough, but in a dynamic project, you're definitely going to forget at some point to do that, and you're going to be wondering why the other movies aren't being looped properly. So just a way to make sure you don't forget it is to have this number look dynamically over here. And so this is looking at the number of rows in folder 1, so which there are 5 rows total, right? Because we have this little name thing. And then I just subtract 1. Actually, when I did that, I need to pause. When you kind of unhook it and hook it again, it becomes a float number weirdly. So then that kind of automatically does what I need it to do. If I add more movies, that number is going to change dynamically. I don't have to worry about it. So this num rows is not a parameter of folder. It is an attribute. So we can see we don't say folder1.par.numRows because parameters are all these things that we see in the parameter dialog box here. Right, so all these things so the refresh parameter is currently set to 1, which is on, right? Whatever. Active is currently set to 1. So these are all parameters that we could change if we wanted to. The number of rows is a kind of inherent attribute to that. So if you want to look up these kind of magic attributes that work for certain types of operators, what we can do is for any of these, click it, and then this is the help wiki for folder.dat. This will give us the Python help folder.dat class. And we can kind of go in here and we see what's called its members. So these are all of the magic attributes that we can get or set in that operator. So numRows being 1. So we just do like opname dot numRows, and that returns the value. So some of these are read only. So let's say by doing this, I can only read that value. It gives me an integer. Something like I do like op folder1.text equals. I can actually set that text that's inside my table. Or if I don't do like the equals thing, that would just be getting what that is. So all the magic words, it's there. Different kinds of things you could do. We don't need to really worry about that too much, but we can modify individual cells of tables. So all the point being, for any operator, this little Python help tells us how to do that. So let's just briefly, we can look a little bit. Count chop class. Okay, so it's got like every chop has these sort of num chans, num samples. We can find all these attributes for that. Which, okay, we don't really care about that right now. So that is the first way to use DATS, asset management. So typically folder reading in some sort of assets, select that is referencing something that's automatically selecting certain rows or columns, and then a null, and then that is going somewhere else. Same thing could be done if I did folder, and instead of movies, let's do, I've got audio, I've got some like junky analysis files there, so it's gonna give me an error probably, but case in point, you can just do this. Actually, no, it took me to assets, audio. There we go. Okay. And then I could do the same thing. Select in my actual folder. I'd want to clean this up. So these this files from Reaper that created analysis of these. So these are not actual audio files. So I could either clean this up, or I could do something like type And then, okay, waveform audio. So let's say I want to use, okay, so this is getting more complicated now, actually. I could use a select and then select rows by values. Didn't quite work. Wait, I need to do that. So I'm just kind of like winging it now. There is a way to do that, and I'm forgetting exactly the way to do it. But you can select based on any row that has this text in it, and it will select those and get rid of the other things. I think the simplest thing would be to just keep your folders organized, so it's only the actual audio files that you want to use. Okay, so that's good for part one. Next up, parameter management. Okay, slight addendum because there's one little thing I missed on this last part. So audio folder that has lots of wave files, other kind of junky analysis things that I would not want to include. So on the select, I just did by values, row select values, and use that as a string. And then from column, I had to change because initially it was just on 0, so that was looking in column 0, and I wanted it to look in column 1. So that's how you might do something like that. And then I would just add another select to do the same kind of index grabbing type of situation. Okay, cool.